What's going on? Want to show you guys something. So one of the things I've been doing last couple weeks, watching every playoff game between 1999 and 2001. Why? Because I remember how much defense was being played during this era. And I wanted to reminisce from 20 years ago, just kind of watching how offense has evolved and seeing what happened back then. So this is kind of a video for Kansas City and the Chiefs for winning last night, and just a video for the NFL in general. So this was something that Philly 500 and I did last year. We did a topic on this video for the bitter dingbats, and it reigned supreme again. So Eagles won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Last year, the Patriots won it, but I believe all four teams that were in the championship games were the top four offenses in the NFL. This year's Super Bowl basically had the best defense in the NFL in it, going against the top offense, and the top offense prevailed. Whereas in Super Bowls prior, we usually don't see this. The defense always suffocates and dominates the offensive team. So we've seen a lot of, obviously, progression with the rule changes, and the game itself is changing so much. But I just kind of wanted to illustrate and kind of explain to you guys what was going on 20 years ago and what's going on now, because people are still not getting out of that mindset, that old school mindset. Defense wins championships. It's not like that anymore. A lot of it is because of the rule changes, but the other reason is because of the evolution of offense. Watching some of these offenses, I mean the St. Louis Rams, perfect example in 1999, just how many wide receivers they were using at a time. I mean, some of the basic kind of offensives, the vanilla offenses, you just saw two wide receivers, one guy on one side, one guy on the other side, and you wouldn't see a lot of variety within the formations. Whereas you see teams like the Eagles, you'll see teams like the Rams, the Giants in 2000 when they had Sean Payton as their offensive coordinator. The utilization of a lot of motion, a lot of formations, a lot of different personnel packages. And as we've seen the NFL evolve, this is kind of where it's been and going. And this is a big reason why Andy Reid has stood the test of time. And he's been able to evolve. I mean, we saw the same things back in 1999, 2000 that he's doing today. Again, like the utilization of all the different formations and the personnel packages and the shifting that he does, just keeping defenses off balance constantly. The big difference now is he's got so much more speed than he did before. If you remember, the wide receivers back in the day, before Terrell Owens came to town, basically, no-name guys. Todd Pigston, Torrance Small, Charles Johnson, those kind of names, weren't household names. And now you look at what he's got in Kansas City, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, all those guys can zoom. But what's occurred, I guess I'd say in the last 5 years or so, but even the last few years, has been obviously just the evolution of the spread offense and just how teams are able now to just spread a defense apart. And we've seen the complete elimination of that old school kind of downhill linebacker, that Dick Butkus type. It's not even around anymore. You need guys who have speed, and we see a lot more runs go along the edges. We see the jet sweeps trying to get to the boundaries. We see a lot of stuff now where you're trying to attack the edges, and it was said back in the day that, you don't run the ball sideline to sideline. You don't do that because defenses are too fast. Well, defenses are even faster today, but teams are doing that. So philosophy has changed. Philosophy has evolved. And it kind of reminds me a little bit, you can kind of compare the NFL to the NBA in a lot of ways. If you remember the NBA in the late 90s, even early 2000s, kind of how low scoring it was, right? You're able to do a little bit more. You're able to be more physical. Then they had the rule changes within the NBA, more freedom of movement. And look how much scoring has now occurred in the NBA. It's ridiculous how many teams are scoring. And what we see in the NFL, kind of like the NBA, the offenses are getting so good, teams go on runs, scoring runs, just like the NBA. We saw it. Spurt ability with the Chiefs to do nothing for about 3.5 quarters, and then just zoom past the 49ers. I mean, that's the Warriors. That's what the Warriors do. Come back from behind and just over. Chiefs didn't play well. They win the football game. That game was played exactly how San Francisco wanted to play it. You know, that was something that I even talked about yesterday in the recap video, man. Like, they played the game exactly the way that they wanted to play it. They pressured Patrick Mahomes. They ran the football, and they lost the game. So there you have it. So, you know, kind of going back to some other teams, because, you know, watching within this notebook and just looking at all the teams and watching all of these games, you know, Baltimore was obviously the big ferocious defense, but, you know, it's amazing how many bad quarterbacks there were. Just so many bad quarterbacks, and just there were a lot of good defenses. Miami was a great defense, I remember. And even watching, you know, just watching, like, you know, guys with concussions and just seeing the evolution of that as well. Zach Thomas had a game where he had 21 tackles against the Baltimore Ravens in the 2001 wildcard game. And at one point, he left the field, like, concussed, and you could see he was, like, wobbling all over the place. They let him back in the game, like 3 plays later. 3 plays. Think about Carson Wentz in the wildcard game against Seattle. If they would have let him come back in. The difference, 20 years ago. Advancements in technology, because we now know how serious concussions can be. But, you know, going back to the offenses thing, we saw, you know, less bunch kind of formations. We don't see, like, the stacking that we see today. John Gruden and the Raiders were one of those teams that did that a lot, stacking the formations, and they would really capitalize. You know, you'd have the bunch sets, and then you'd have a guy like Tim Brown come across the field. You'd always be wide open. Rich Gannon's so precise with his throwing, and always able to put the ball on the proper shoulder, and that's why the Raiders were so good. They ran the football real well, and then they utilized those different formations and the bunches and the stacks of John Gruden. So that was sort of the stuff that you didn't see back then. It was the Raiders doing that sort of stuff. It was the Eagles doing that sort of stuff. Sean Payton with the Giants, they did a lot of shifting. I'm trying to think of other teams, the Rams. But, you know, for example, I'm remembering the 1999 NFC playoffs, and it was the quarterbacks were so putrid. Kurt Warner was the MVP of the league. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer. But the other guys, the 2 seed was Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, Sean King. Washington had Brad Johnson. I think it was Brad Johnson, if I remember correctly. The 4 seed was, what was the 4 seed? I'm trying to remember who played the Rams. It was Minnesota. Minnesota had Jeff George as its quarterback, playing against the Cowboys there in the wild card round. It was Troy Aikman. 6 seed was, who was the 6 seed? 6 seed was the Detroit Lions and Gus Frerotte. So as you can see, a lot better defenses back then, and I think even the evolution of the offense has helped with drafting and just being able to spot talent within college football, because the college game has actually gotten a lot like the pro game. If you go back and look at, like, early 2000s college football, a lot of those quarterbacks, they're running the ball. They're running the option, the old school type of stuff. So we're seeing evolution within concepts, and obviously you see RPO type of stuff now. We see pistol formation. The only team that I could think of that kind of used the pistol was, they didn't use a pistol formation, but they used what they called a sawed-off shotgun, and that was Green Bay. The Packers did that. After Holmgren left, I'm trying to remember who the coach was. God, who was their coach back in the day? I don't remember who was their coach in 2000. Whew, I'm blanking on that. I want to think Mike Sherman or something, right? Anyway, thinking about other things, again, like the evolution of the quarterback, the progression of the quarterback. We're seeing more hits now in the NFL draft, guys. There's less busts. Like, I'm talking about bad busts, because we would have so many bad busts back in the day. I just remember the 1999 NFL draft, the one that Donovan got drafted in. Tim Couch stunk. Achilles Smith stunk. You had Dante Culpepper, Cade McNown. Dante Culpepper was good. McNabb was good, but those other guys, ugh. Remember we had Joey Harrington was another one. I mean, there was a lot of bad quarterbacks that were being drafted. By the way, if anyone wants to comment in, and if anyone has some questions, I will answer some. If anybody wants to ask anything. So I guess if I'm going to be back on here, I'm going to do things the way I want to do them. I'm just going to do videos I want to do, I guess. Whether that means Eagles, whether that means silly stuff like this, where, I'm just kind of showing off, some of my past knowledge. But like, just this is what I've been doing the last couple of weeks, really watching the early 2000s of the playoffs. And it's I always love looking back, because to see, again, the evolution of everything, and to see how things progress. Just looking through this thing, the 1999 NFC Championship game, for example. I mean, that was such an awesome game because of the difference between the playing styles. You had Tampa Bay, the great defense of that against St. Louis, and what it was doing. And I remember when teams couldn't stop the Rams, and the Rams would just get these huge plays, deep plays, Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce. And what teams would do, after that season in 2000, they would, not that they would stop the Rams, but they limit them a little bit by just playing a little bit more conservative, having more safeties in the back end, not letting Torrey Holt and Bruce beat them deep. They would make them go on long, methodical drives. And in 2000, they got knocked out in the wild card round, but then a year later, they're back in the Super Bowl, and that's when the dynasty started in New England. And I'll tell you what. The other thing I've been doing is doing like the play-by-play scoring with all of this, and I'll tell you, man, this reminiscing on this New England Oakland game. Now, I haven't watched it in a while, but I have the scoring here, and it was 84-81 New England. I rated it as a 4.5-star game. This game was so cool for just so many different reasons. The snow, seeing that offense of the Raiders go up against the physicality of New England and that defense. That defense that was getting, basically underrated at that point, because 2001, they weren't supposed to win anything. They beat the Raiders, they went and beat the Steelers in the AFC Championship, and then obviously upset the Rams in the Super Bowl. But back then, I'm trying to think of scenarios in the Super Bowl where a top offense faced a top defense in the same Super Bowl, and I honest to God, all the defenses pretty much won. But it's not like that anymore. And it's crazy to see how much this game has actually evolved since I started watching it as a child. Again, Andy Reid, man, just watching some of those games. I'm going to watch. I got to finish watching the Chicago game. It was Eagles in Chicago in the divisional playoff game, and just seeing all the different utilizations of the screen. Not that teams weren't doing it, but nobody was doing it as often and as effectively as Andy Reid. It's cool to see the different ways that he uses a screen game. And obviously over the years, we've seen that screen game evolve so much. It's unbelievable. Just with the tight ends, how he uses Kelsey and how he fakes and all the shifts and the motions. Whew. Andy's got it right now. And I'll tell you what, with a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, this is probably not going to be the only one, the only Super Bowl for Big Red. Probably not. Probably not. So the other cool thing here, that I want to discuss is the evolution of the quarterback and kind of what we've seen. The evolution from the traditional pocket quarterback to kind of what we saw in the 2010s. You know, Aaron Rodgers was a quarterback who was like a first of his time. Because what happened before Aaron Rodgers was this. You had guys who were either the traditional pocket passer or the guy who was, you know, kind of better throwing on the move. You didn't really have the guy who did both. Joe Montana did both actually really well, but but he didn't actually like use his legs to extend plays and then throw the ball downfield. That's the difference with Rodgers. But in terms of like play action bootlegs, Joe Montana could throw from the pocket and on the move. That's why he was, you know, the GOAT. But you know, Brady, Peyton Manning, those guys, pocket style quarterbacks. You don't think of those guys, you know, throwing on the move, escaping the pocket, doing those sort of things. But with Aaron Rodgers, it was obviously great from the pocket, able to also escape it and do all those things. Oh, I wonder if my comments are probably actually, are they, man, they're probably banned, aren't they? Are they turned off? There's no way I would go this long without getting a single comment. So this is probably my fault. I got to figure out how do I get rid of the comments thing? Where's Sean Fitzpatrick? DM me on Twitter. I don't know how to get rid of that because it was definitely like that on the other video I did yesterday. Comments were turned off. I want to hear from you guys. Shit, man. So I want to try and get back on here a little bit. I miss. I'm not gonna lie to you. I miss the grind of just doing a video every day. You know, I think this would be good for the mental health as well. If you guys, you know, kind of remember what I'm kind of going through right now. So, yeah, let's talk about Andy Reid some more because I do want to talk about him and. Oh, it's discussing Aaron Rodgers. Okay, so he was the first guy to do both. In the pocket, throw on the move. And then now we have Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is the next guy. So we had Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, you can lump into the discussion. Those three guys. And then the next wave was Aaron Rodgers. And now we're seeing, you know, the beneficiary of Aaron Rodgers because of all these guys who can do both. You know, throw in the pocket and on the move. So many more guys now are escaping the pocket and throwing on the move. But now it's Patrick Mahomes is a new guy. And what he's doing that's different than even Rodgers is some. Yes, Rodgers can do some of the sidearm flipping stuff that, you know, whatever. But what Mahomes is doing is it's a whole nother level. I mean, the sidearm flicks, the way that he can just launch the ball downfield. Not that Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a strong arm, but man, Mahomes is next level. And if he starts perfecting this like no look pass thing, good night. Good night. I had the stats here for my my radio appearance today. So Patrick Mahomes, youngest player to win the Super Bowl MVP or Super Bowl, yeah, just to win the Super Bowl and also the MVP. So he's 24 years old. He is the youngest to win the Super Bowl MVP ever. 46 days younger than Tom Brady, and then also a year younger than the 25-year-old Joe Montana when he won Super Bowl MVP for the first time. So he's going to be the next guy. And to see them win the way that they won last night, spurred ability, just whitewashing the Niners in the fourth quarter. Now, yes, Kyle Shanahan choked. That was a choke job. 14 passes, 4 runs there with like 10 minutes left. That's inexplicable, especially when you did it in Super Bowl 51. Especially when you were running the ball the way that you were running it. Again, they were pressuring Mahomes. They were running the football. They did exactly what they wanted to do, and they lost. Because Kyle Shanahan. Big reason. Not all the reason, but like 69% of the reason. All right. I think I said everything I wanted to say, and if I didn't, that would suck. I'm trying to think what other offenses back in the day that did I like. I mean, again, a lot of teams, you didn't see the third wide receiver on the field all the time. Like for the Vikings, for example, with Dennis Green, you guys obviously, they had the talent with Randy Moss and Chris Carter, but most of the time it's just those two guys. And you didn't see like the stacks, you didn't see the bunches, you didn't see, multiple wide receivers on the field. It was the guys who were next level. It was the teams who were a little bit ahead of the time, a little bit ahead of the curve. Guys like John Gruden, Andy Reid, Sean Payton, the guys who are still kind of doing it now. And it's impressive to see Andy Reid stand the test of time because there's so many guys who have come and gone. You get the fad, and then it goes out, and then you can't evolve. Think Chip Kelly. He was great for 2 years, and then he didn't change the system. And then he's gone, and he might be cut from UCLA next. Got to evolve. Rex Ryan. How long did he last? Like 10 years? 5-10 years? And then the game passed him by. You see it all the time. But Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, they've stood the test of time. And it's really impressive. All right, so I'm going to try and figure out the comments thing for the next video. I see a bunch of you guys in here. I apologize that I can't answer, some comments. I'm glad that you guys stuck around for the whole video because I don't want to just do Eagle stuff. I want to try and do like just whatever I want to talk about. I love NFL history. I love stuff like this. So if you guys love it, if I can figure out a way to turn the comments on, let me know below because this is stuff I do. I mean, I'm a nut. I'm a nut. 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 All right. That's it for this video. Adrian Fedkiw, I'm out. Peace.